North Wilkesboro Speedway is back in a virtual sense, and NASCAR updates the rulebook saying that they will fine crew members who don't follow social distancing guidelines. We have a lot to discuss in today's episode. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I notice I always say we have a lot to discuss in this video pretty much at the beginning of every video, and usually I guess it's the case. I just feel like I need to come up with new sayings so I don't sound mechanical. But who has time for that kind of stuff? Actually, I might have some time for that coming up pretty soon because last night was my final college class, which means I'm technically not graduated yet. I guess graduation's pretty much been canceled, but I don't have a diploma yet, but I'll assume they'll mail it to me here in a couple weeks. But I am officially, almost officially done with college, so that's pretty wild. Great timing to be introduced to the real world for the first time. That's anyway, I'll talk more about that in the future and what that means for this YouTube channel going forward. I'll have some announcements probably in the not so distant future on all that, but feels good. Feels good. I still have an essay I gotta turn in tomorrow night, but other than that, I'm pretty much done. So it's kind of crazy. Some people on Twitter seem surprised to know that I'm only 22 years old. I've started this YouTube channel when I was still in junior high, so I'm not that old, guys. I'm still relatively young, relatively new at this whole thing. I'm kind of just figuring it out as I go along. But yeah, so I'll have some more updates, announcements regarding this channel, what's to come, all that type of stuff fairly soon, because this is a crazy point in my life, and it's a crazy point in the entire world's existence. And that, of course, affects NASCAR. We're going to talk about that a lot today. Where should we start with this episode? Should we start with the good news? Should we start with the bad news? I typically start with the bad news. We'll get it out of the way. Well, some bad news came out yesterday. Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal reported that NASCAR initiated a second round of corporate layoffs. In his tweet, Adam Stern cites both obviously the coronavirus pandemic, but also the recent merger acquisition of ISC as the reasons for these layoffs. He says there he's not entirely sure how many were laid off in this latest round, but he estimates 69 were laid off in early April, which we talked about on the show when it happened. NASCAR already implemented a first initial round of layoffs back in April. This is now round 2. This is obviously terrible for everyone involved, everyone who has lost their jobs with NASCAR or with ISC, and obviously just bad timing all around. I mean, there is never a good time to lose your job, but obviously right now it's just piling on at this point. It's really terrible for everyone who's been affected, who's had their job affected by this pandemic. I think sometimes that gets swept under the radar, but people who lost their jobs, this is definitely an extremely stressful time in their lives as well. But yeah, as the report said, it's unclear how many people were laid off in this round. We already know from past reports that everyone at NASCAR corporate is taking 20 to 25% pay cuts during this this hiatus since racing was suspended in early March. Now, when NASCAR first laid off those 60 or so employees at the beginning of April, that was largely believed to be due to the merger with ISC, less to do with the pandemic. It sounds like those layoffs were already kind of in motion for a good amount of time before the pandemic hit. It's pretty typical when major companies go through mergers and acquisitions like this, spend all this money to acquire and expand their company. Often some of the people who come over don't make the cut. There's often layoffs. That's typical in large acquisitions, large corporate acquisitions like this. So those layoffs in April, while they suck obviously for those who it affects, for sure, those didn't concern me from a health of the sport, is NASCAR dying sort of standpoint. These here do concern me more because I think it's clear these are more a result of the pandemic, the fact that we have not had real racing for now over 2 months now. But there's a shred of hope because NASCAR is now, as of the time of making this video, only 10 days away from returning in some capacity. Could some number of these jobs return? Some of these employees who are being laid off, could this be a relatively short-term layoff period? That remains to be seen. I have no idea. And again, some of these layoffs still might have more to do with the ISC merger, and the pandemic may not be a factor in this at all. But it's all very unclear, very uncertain. NASCAR already was in kind of a volatile state before this pandemic. There's been a lot of turnover in NASCAR corporate over the last several years. A lot of new people joining the fold, a lot of positions being shuffled around. Obviously now with buying up ISC, so they own the majority of the racetracks we race at now, that of course shakes things up significantly as well. So there's been a lot of changes, and this pandemic striking right here, obviously it's just amplified things even more. It's crazy, I'm sure, at NASCAR corporate right now. But I am at least hopeful that this now second round of layoffs hopefully is a very temporary thing. Hopefully with NASCAR getting back to the racetrack here sometime in the next couple weeks, with that TV money coming in, hopefully some number of these jobs can come back soon, and some number of these folks who are being laid off can hopefully get back to work and get paid sometime soon. But fingers crossed. I don't have any inside information on this one. I'm kind of just speculating as well as everybody else. It's not great, but it's the nature of the world economy right now, and really it just shows nobody's truly safe. And I do still feel bad for those who work like at the racetrack on race weekend, people who rely on those hourly wages working at the track. I'm sure most all of those positions are non-existent at the moment because there's going to be no fans in attendance when they race at Darlington, when they race at Charlotte. So those are a lot of positions that are not available as well. So I'm sure that's really tragic for a lot of those local economies, but it just is what it is. Everyone's making do the best they can, and hopefully with NASCAR getting back on the track fairly soon here, hopefully we can mitigate some of this disaster, but remains to be seen on that one. I figured I'd start with the bad news, get the bad news out of the way. Let's talk about some good news. North Wilkesboro Speedway is making its triumphant return to primetime television in the virtual world. Of course, not the real racetrack. The real racetrack needs some work, but North Wilkesboro Speedway, obviously one of the classic, iconic NASCAR short tracks, has been closed to NASCAR competition since the late 90s, but it's making its return thanks to the great power and technology that iRacing possesses. At the end of last year, remember Dale Earnhardt Jr. was a part of a team, kind of helped push things along, move things along, and got iRacing out there to clean the racetrack up, the real racetrack, the real North Wilkesboro Speedway, and we're able to scan it the way iRacing does. And over the last several months, they've been working to bring this track into the virtual world, preserve it in a sense, and now for the first time ever, it's going to see real life competition, well, real virtual life competition. This is getting really tiresome. It's finally going to be released on the iRacing platform sometime pretty soon, early summer, but we're going to get our first look at it here for the eNASCAR Pro Invitational. It's not labeled the Pro Invitational, it's kind of just a one-off, but a lot of the same Cup Series drivers that we're used to seeing race in these Pro Invitational races will be racing Saturday. The race is on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's still going to be on Fox, still going to be on FS1, but it's not Sunday, it's Saturday. Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern. That's when the race will be happening. And earlier today, or yesterday, they revealed the entry list for who's racing. And there's some pretty surprising names on this list, I must say. Bob Parker's tweeted out the preliminary entry list, and you can see it right there. A few names that stick out to me. Jeff Gordon, obviously, who teased in last week's broadcast that he would be returning for this race. He's on that list. Bobby Labonte is still racing. He doesn't have a car number listed there, but he is planning to race this weekend. Those two are notable because both Jeff Gordon and Bobby Labonte actually raced at the real North Wilkesboro Speedway when it was still on the Cup Series schedule in the 90s. Jeff Gordon, in fact, won the final Cup race at North Wilkesboro Speedway. Dale Jr., not surprising, is on that list. Obviously, this track means a lot to him. John Wood, driving the number 21 car. That kind of came out of nowhere. I had to kind of refresh my memory on John Wood before this episode, because that's not a name that has been talked about. He's not a guy who's hit the racetrack, who's been behind the wheel of a race car much in recent memory at all. But pretty interesting to see John Wood on the entry list for this weekend's iRacing event at North Wilkesboro Speedway. Of course, driving the Wood Brothers racing car. Not surprising at all there. There were a few drivers you may have noticed on that list I showed you a second ago that were missing. All 4 Hendrick Motorsports drivers, as well as all 3 Team Penske drivers, as well as the Chip Ganassi guys, Kurt Busch. Obviously, Kenseth wasn't going to race. Kenseth's not racing iRacing, but Kurt Busch is not on the list either. Also, Corey LaJoie I didn't see on that entry list. They are not planning to race at North Wilkesboro this weekend, and I'm not sure why. I'm a little surprised William Byron especially is not on the entry list, given that he won half the Pro Invitational races and is really freaking good at iRacing. I figured he'd want to keep making a statement as best he can. The only thing I can imagine is that Penske and Hendrick specifically just want to, now that we're a week or so away from real racing returning, they want to turn all their focus and attention into preparing for Darlington, and don't want to, spend their energy preparing and practicing for North Wilkesboro. I still think it's a little strange that they're blowing this thing off entirely. I mean, you tell me William Byron can't put in 2 hours of practice, Friday afternoon and just call it and then race in the race and just that be it? Like, a pretty minimal effort required to join these Pro Invitational or join these iRacing events. So I'm not sure what the actual reasoning behind it is, but it is interesting that it's the 4 Hendrick cars and the 3 Penske cars, and then a couple stragglers here and there that are not racing. All the Gibbs cars are entry. In fact, Martin Truex Jr., if you looked on that list, I forgot to mention, Martin Truex Jr. is on the entry list. He hasn't raced in any of the iRacing stuff so far. Kind of late to the party, Truex, but lo and behold, there he is on the entry list. So all the Gibbs cars, all the Stewart-Haas drivers, but yeah, a couple major teams not participating in Saturday afternoon's event. But I'm excited to see what Jeff Gordon does. I'm excited to see what Dale Jr. does. I actually think Dale Jr. might be my pick to win this race. That would be cool to see for sure. Bobby Labonte has been impressive in a lot of the Pro Invitational races so far. So don't count Bobby Labonte out. It'll be interesting to see how the drivers who've actually raced at North Wilkesboro in real life, if any of those skills from over 20 years ago translate to the virtual world. We'll have to wait and see. It's been so long, I doubt it, but that will still be exciting to see. It's a vintage NASCAR racetrack, and from the renderings that I've seen so far, they've maintained kind of the classic look. A lot of the signs, the signage, the sponsored logos and stuff, all look kind of the way they did when North Wilkesboro closed. So that's pretty cool. It's going to be a miniature throwback race, a virtual throwback race in a sense. So I'm excited to see it. Again, that is Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Fox FS1. Check your local listings, all that stuff. They're not paying me to say that. I just want people to watch because I'll be tweeting about it, and I don't want you people to be confused about what I'm tweeting about. And of course, I'll do a video after it as well. So anyway, keep an eye out for that race this weekend. That's pretty freaking exciting. We have one last thing to talk about in this episode, one last major story. I've talked about bad news. I've talked about good news. This next one's kind of neutral news. And I'm saying neutral news because it has the potential to either dip heavily into the good or heavily into the bad, and we're really not going to find out until, after May 17th. So I saw it yesterday. NASCAR updated their rule book to include some of their new social distancing, post-pandemic measures. And according to this new rule, NASCAR now has the ability to fine team members who do not comply with their coronavirus protocols. And this new change in the rule book states that team members could be fined between $10,000 and $50,000. And this, of course, is if they do not follow those protocols. Now, brief reminder on what some of these protocols are actually. Each team's roster, as in each individual car's team roster, is going to be limited to 16, and that includes the driver, crew chief, etc. There's going to be screenings as you enter and exit the racetrack. In the garage area, they're going to strictly encourage social distancing. Everyone has to wear face masks or some sort of facial covering. NASCAR has also apparently asked all the team members, everyone who's going to be at the racetrack each week, to keep a log of every person they come into contact with on a daily basis, so that if someone were to come down with the virus, they would be able to have a log to help with contact tracing. Spotters up on the roof will be spaced 6 to 10 feet apart. And another thing I saw is that driver motorhomes will be a little bit more spread out and parked than usual. So those are the main things. Wearing masks, social distancing, the roster size obviously is going to be strictly enforced. But if you break any of those rules in any significant way, sounds like NASCAR is prepared to drop the hammer on you. And so I know what you guys are thinking, man, that sounds really strict. And it is. But in my opinion, I think it is absolutely necessary. And I'm not just talking about health and safety reasons. Obviously, I want every team member and driver, everyone at the track to be as healthy and safe as possible. And for that reason alone, I think most everyone should be okay practicing these guidelines and should stick to them just for that reason alone. But the reason I'm okay with NASCAR being strict about this, and I think the reason NASCAR is going to be strict about this, is because they know. NASCAR knows that a lot of people are going to be watching this first race back as well as the several races immediately afterwards. And I'm not just talking about your typical hardcore racing fans. The national media is going to have NASCAR under a microscope. And they're going to be looking for any opportunity to poke holes in what NASCAR is doing. And NASCAR knows this, and they desperately do not want to be covered the way the media is covering, people in crowded bars or people who are going out to the beach and the beach is slammed with people. You know how the media is covering those types of stories, those groups? NASCAR wants to avoid that type of negative press at all costs. NASCAR is looking to avoid giving the media any opportunity to discredit them. NASCAR wants to look like they're taking this pandemic as seriously as they possibly can, because that's the only way the national media will stay off their backs. NASCAR going back racing on May 17th, albeit with no fans in the stands, this is a very high risk, high reward scenario. The high reward is NASCAR, tens, hundreds of thousands more people, maybe millions more people will tune in on TV to watch this coming Sunday, May 17th's race than would have usually. So that potentially is a very high reward, but the risk that comes with it is that with all these new eyeballs, with all this new attention, everyone, the media, other major sports, fans, people, Americans in general, are going to be looking to NASCAR as one of the first major sports to get back to some semblance of action. They're going to look to them for guidance almost. They're also going to look to them to see what they do right and what they do wrong. a lot of people are going to be scrutinizing over every detail of how NASCAR conducts these first few races back. And of course, if the media doesn't like one thing or the other, or if some people who maybe aren't racing fans don't like the way NASCAR is handling things, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. The important thing here, honestly, in my opinion, is that with these races being run on national television and with no or very few other major sporting events on TV right now, this is going to be big for NASCAR ratings. This race will get a higher TV viewership than it normally would, and I'm excited about that. I think that's good news no matter how you slice it. But obviously NASCAR wants to avoid as much negative press as possible. I can't blame them. I think that's smart, and so I don't have a problem with them threatening these hefty penalties for people who break protocol. Everyone's going to be under a microscope here, guys, and if anyone steps out of line, you're going to hear about it. NASCAR desperately wants to keep all their ducks in a row these first couple weeks back, because if they're able to run these next few races without any hiccups, without putting health and safety of crews, of drivers, of anyone in any major risk, if they're able to get out of this somehow, in my opinion, scot-free, and they pull in the extra millions of TV viewers, this is going to be huge. This may be the closest we ever get to replicating the 1979 Daytona 500. Obviously, the situation surrounding these coming weeks is much more dire in the grand scheme of the world and the country at the moment. But as far as bringing in new fans, people who are forced to watch NASCAR, kind of almost like a captive audience, had huge effects. The 1979 Daytona 500 broadcast on national TV in its entirety with a great finish, the fight at the end. That was huge for NASCAR's boom in popularity. Not saying that this quarantine and the races that we're going to see in the next few weeks are going to have the same effect. No, they will not. But they will have a positive effect if NASCAR plays their cards correctly and does everything right. And right now they're saying all the right things, I believe, to keep everyone happy and to bring racing back. But we're going to see how they execute it. And so NASCAR threatening these harsh penalties is supposed to tell people that we're taking this seriously, and I don't have a problem with it. If you're at the racetrack, just follow the rules. Just follow the rules, and if you do that, NASCAR will look fine, and I think the weekends will go off without any major issue, and we can have racing back and hopefully pull in a few extra eyeballs here and there as a result. So I don't have a problem with NASCAR threatening these harsh penalties. Just don't screw up, guys. It's easy. Just put a mask. I saw some people were debating whether it's moral for teams to sell sponsorship or put sponsor logos on their face masks. Some people are saying they think it's a bad look. Others are saying they don't care. Personally, I don't really care if people want to walk around in a Ally face mask or a Home Depot. And Home Depot doesn't sponsor NASCAR anymore. What year is this? If Alan Gustafson wants to walk around with a blue Napa face mask, I don't think that's an issue. I think that's as NASCAR as it gets. That's just NASCAR being NASCAR. I don't think that's disrespectful. But anyway, that's a side tangent. That's not where I was sending this video. I think I made my point as clear as can be. But now I want to hear what you guys think. What do you think of all the things we talked about in this video? My gosh, I already forgot what I started this video with. Oh yeah, North Wilkesboro. No, the bad news. That was the layoffs. Yeah, this video's gone all over the place. Let me know what you think about all that stuff. Let me know what you think about this new rule change that NASCAR could penalize crew members if they don't socially distance at the track. Let me know what you guys think about all this stuff. But thanks for watching, guys. That's all I've got for this episode. Subscribe if you are new. We talk about NASCAR all throughout the week, every week, throughout the entire year. This never stops. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Y'all are the real MVPs supporting the show during these uncertain times. I greatly appreciate it. I could not do this show as regularly as I do it without the support I get from you all on Patreon. So thank you all a ton for going above and beyond. Really means a lot to me. Icebox Pickup Throwdown iRacing Truck Series is tonight. If you're watching this shortly after it's uploaded, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel from the virtual Michigan International Speedway. We have a lot of your favorite Truck Series drivers, some Xfinity drivers, some other wildcard drivers from other series as well are participating. I'm gonna be a part of the broadcast team, of course, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So tune into that tonight. And yeah, other than that, I have nothing else to say. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for supporting the channel, supporting the show, and I will see you again very, very soon. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.